Hi, folks. Thanks for joining me for this session. What we're going to be looking at is 4 key metrics of DevOps and 4 key maps to get them moving in the right direction. So I'm going to dive right into the agenda. And first, we're going to be talking about value stream thinking. A lot of this practice, a lot of what we're focused on in DevOps these days is looking at the entire value stream, looking beyond DevOps to the entire flow of value through the organization. And so I want to introduce ways to think about that, how that is progressing, and then I'll introduce flow engineering, which is how we're going to get to better flow throughout the organization, beyond DevOps through all the value delivery activities. And I'll introduce the 4 key metrics, the 4 key maps, and then I'll tell you where to go next, how to take this into practice in your organization, in your teams, at whatever scale you want. So to establish some key terms and set us off on the right foot, first, when I talk about value, value has a lot of different meanings, but really it's the idea of fulfilling a desire for an organization or a customer or an employee. And I think thinking in terms of a variety of different customers is really valuable because we often think that it's customer only, and that can cause us to miss some things. Or, we're focused on an internal customer and forgetting about the ultimate customer, right? So framing value is really important, and thinking about value is critically important to this process. And what's great about value streams is that they're all about value. They're all about customers. They're all about the entire picture, all the moving pieces that it takes to deliver value to customers. And that takes flow. So when I'm talking about flow, we're talking about a lack of friction. We're talking about minimizing handoffs. We're talking about minimizing waste so that we can get value to customers as quickly and as easily as possible. So in a nutshell, a value stream is really from idea to customer reconciliation of value. The entire process that takes from the moment you have an issue or an idea that you want to cash in on or you want to deliver to customers to the moment that they're using it and they're getting value from it. And maybe you're getting money or satisfaction or data in return. And this kind of bumps up against our current situation because we have org charts, right? These org charts are very static, very structured. They're meant to establish reporting structures. They're meant to keep everything organized. But as we can see, if we look at how value actually flows through the organization, how we go from an idea to delivering customer value, we're bouncing all over the organization to do that. And obviously, that's not ideal. There's a lot of moving pieces involved. There's a lot of silos that we cross. There's a lot of handoffs that need to happen. And often it's really hard to even understand what the current flow is, much less optimize what we have. So what I propose and where the industry is going is this stream orientation. So creating stream-oriented teams, products rather than projects, where we're pulling people from different parts of the organization and sticking them together, creating teams and creating this flow of value through the organization that is customer-oriented by default and flowing by default. And that takes thinking about how do our products interact, what really is a product. We see movement towards things like platform as a product. We see things like autonomous teams that can operate on their own at maximum velocity with minimum dependencies across the organization. And all of that is assisting this flow of value and making it a lot easier to do what we want and do it as effectively and efficiently as possible. So flow engineering is a term that I use to talk about making this flow as effective as possible and focusing on how do we optimize the flow of value through all of these parts of the organization in a way that is sustainable, scalable, and really without, pulling our hair out. And the 4x4 method really comes into this as a way of thinking about the leading metrics in the DevOps space, in the achievement space, where the highest levels of operation in the ecosystem, the most high-performing companies are doing extremely well in these 4 ways: in deployment frequency, lead time for changes, mean time to recovery, and change failure rate. And the 4 maps are a method that I use to go from a clearly defined outcome. Maybe we want to deliver faster to customers. Maybe we want to improve quality. Maybe we want to improve customer satisfaction. Taking that goal, mapping it to specific metrics, and then figuring out how are we actually going to do that? How are we going to get from where we know what we want to making progress and making sure that those metrics are moving in the right direction? And maybe part of our goal is to make sure that they stay moving in the right direction, right? Maybe we just want to figure out what's going on so that we can avoid quality issues, or we can boost the value that we're delivering. So I've highlighted lead time for changes here because it pertains to a specific use case that we're going to talk about. We're going to walk through a scenario that is focused on that as a primary metric, but we're going to be balancing these across all 4 metrics to make sure that we're not missing anything. We don't want quality to go down as our speed goes up. So the 4 key metrics, if you're not familiar with these, they come out of DORA, which is a lot of research, 6 years of surveying high-performing, low-performing, medium-performing companies, and collecting that data and figuring out that there's these 4 key metrics that are tied to high performance. And they're great metrics because they balance velocity and stability. So it means that if you're tracking all 4, you know that your quality is not going to go through the floor if you focus on velocity, right? Because you keep track of all these things and make sure that you're not investing too heavily in one direction and suffering in another. But this comes with a warning. As I mentioned, these metrics are not goals. They're not high enough to be important on their own, right? You want to be tying these metrics to a larger goal, like customer satisfaction, or like releasing value to customers more often. That's not linked to deploy time. That's related to your entire lead time from the time you come up with ideas to when the customers are actually using them. So you want to think big, you want to think of big outcomes, and then you want to look at, okay, well, which metrics work? And these 4 metrics aren't going to work for everybody in every situation. They're just examples of balanced metrics. So I'm just using them as a reference, but you're going to have to come up with your own. This process will make that easier. So as I mentioned, beginning with the end in mind is critically important, especially as we're striving for better. We want to think about, what does better look like, right? What is the ideal that we're striving towards? And so we can brainstorm this. This is the beginning of an outcome mapping workshop where we collect a bunch of ideas or pains from the team, and then we all agree on one specific outcome and work towards that. So this is a way of surfacing what's going on, what are people worried about, what do they care about, what are the ideas that we have. Let's, as a team, decide how we want to phrase this goal that we want to set towards, and let's align and be on the same page. And that can mean disagreeing and committing, but we all have to be on the same page and we all have to be rowing in the same direction. So this is a critical starting point. From there, what we do is if we pick release every 2 weeks, then we want to think about, what does success look like? What is going to make that really valuable? Why is that super important? So we collect more information about, why is this valuable to everybody? Why is it valuable to us as individuals? Why is it important to our customers? Why is it important to the organization? Those 3 dimensions of value. So we want to consider this from multiple angles because we want to buy into it. We want to get really excited about it. We want to make sure that we understand it because it's going to inform our approach. And then the next thing we think about is obstacles. What's going to get in the way? Because if we just set off at top speed in a direction that we choose, we might trip over something right away, right? So you want to think ahead. What's going to be challenges that we can predict? What are the issues that we can imagine we'll encounter on the way? So other things that you could do with an outcome map, you can think about vision and values. It's a great starting point. If you don't have clear vision and values, that is the bedrock. You want to start there. You want to maybe even re-examine those if you've got them set in stone and up on the wall or clearly visible at all times. Starting from vision and values can be a really powerful way of connecting your desired outcome to something that's critically important to the company already, and that people hopefully understand really well. You want to make sure that these things are aligned, because if they're not, there's going to be tension. There's going to be a gap. Something's going to be pulling in the wrong direction. So you can also add things like investigations and experiments. So let's say you come up with obstacles. What can we do to test those obstacles? Maybe figure out more about how big a deal they are. Maybe we can find ways to avoid them or plan ahead to avoid them. And eventually you get to measurements and metrics. But starting with measurements and metrics means that we're already picking a target before we truly understand the landscape, right? So I would leave that to later. Likewise with roles. Sometimes with roles, we can establish that leaders are attached to a specific outcome, but picking specific individuals attached really depends on our strategy of approach, right? If we don't know what the battle plan is, inviting a bunch of people, it doesn't make much sense early on. So we want to sort of leave that until we've fleshed this out a little bit more, maybe gone through the rest of the map so you get a better picture of what's going on, and then come back to this. And methods are critically important here, but deciding on, again, the approach before we really understand what we're aiming at and what it looks like is usually premature. So what do we get out of an outcome map? We align our perspectives. We come from different ideas. In a team of 8 people, you're going to have 8 different opinions on what the perfect outcome is, or the ideal outcome, or what to do next. So we want to bring that together. We want to get everybody on the same page. We want to analyze our outcomes, think about them from a few different angles so that we understand more about where we're headed, but also what's in between us and that goal. And the importance is really critical to getting everybody excited and keeping everybody excited, because these things are not usually trivial. We're going to have to maintain motivation, keep the momentum going over the long term. So that's really important to making sure that people stay motivated and bought into the idea. And the obstacles are going to be helping us from, stepping on all the Lego pieces in the dark or tripping over something that's clearly visible if we were just looking in the right place. That brings us to the value stream map. So the value stream map, you'll notice in the top right here, the release every 2 weeks is our goal. So we want to keep that clearly visible at all times because it frames our efforts. We want to make sure that everything that we're doing, all the time that we're spending, is in service of that goal, because it keeps us on track. It keeps us focused. It's easy to get into the weeds here. So we want to keep that present at all times. And what you're seeing here is a sequence of activities that are contributing to the value stream in question, which is our release value stream, right? So step 1, we're probably looking at customer requests, for instance. Maybe they're partner requests, maybe they're ideas that we have in a backlog. And then all the way to step 7, which is probably where we're seeing our customers using the results, right? You're collecting data maybe on activity. Maybe you're getting paid for delivering a specific feature to production. So all the steps that it takes, all the activities involved, what you're seeing, the boundaries here are the handoffs, right? So going from step 1 to step 2 is you might have different individuals doing those tasks, so they're specific enough that there's a handoff, there's a delay between them. Sometimes there's no delay, but they're distinct activities, so you want to measure them separately. And the measurements of the activities themselves are these numbers above. So the time it takes to perform step 1 is 3 hours. Then we wait for 4 hours, maybe because we send somebody a message and they get to step 2 eventually. Maybe we send an email and it gets picked up after an average of 4 hours. That's what we're seeing here. 3 hours, 4 hours passes. The step 2 takes 4 hours. We get to this step, this area between step 2, step 3, this delay of 3 days. And the reason that's highlighted is because if we look at the rest of the value stream, really stands out as a hotspot. This is more time than anything else in the value stream. So we want to look more deeply at it, especially because it's a delay. Because a delay is not adding value, right? Nobody's paying to get anything slower. So we want to highlight that and then investigate. And we might draw a highlight around the next delay too. The 2 days. 2 days is a big amount of time considering we have 3 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours. If we're talking hours and days are something that we want to look at and we want to investigate further. So we hotspot those things and we can come back to them. We can dig deeper and figure out what's happening there. Why is there a delay? What can we do about it? So other things that you can map onto a value stream, you'll see this example here where there's a lot of stuff on here. We have things like roles. We have things like different areas where code is deployed in a sprint. So we'll have different environments highlighted. We're also able to map quality. So quality is at each activity, what percentage of that activity at the completion is complete and accurate. So if I'm writing code, when I'm done writing code, what percentage of the time is that complete and accurate, meaning there's no bugs. So that number can be really low, but it doesn't matter. What we're aiming for is better, right? We're not aiming for 100%. We're aiming for better than where we are. So we can have low numbers, especially with value added time. That's another one where percentage of the activity that's actually delivering value to our customer, that can be really low. But what we want to do is look at it and where it's really low, figure out what can we do to boost the value? What can we do to spend more time adding value than doing work or struggling with friction, waiting for things to happen? So these are really, really important and valuable metrics because they highlight things that we don't ordinarily see on a daily basis. You can see volatility, so the swing between best case scenario, worst case scenario. Obviously, we want things to be as consistent as possible. So a big swing between the fastest something can happen and the slowest something can happen. We want to shrink that wherever possible. We want to look at where things are queuing and backing up. And then we can also look at tools and artifacts involved as well. As another dimension, maybe we have too many tools and there's a lot of jumping between them. Maybe we're creating artifacts that nobody really wants to pay for that aren't really valuable to us. So we can surface all of that data and make really great decisions about how to improve the flow. So essentially, value stream mapping is the ability for us to see and measure things, specifically activities that are going on. And that means that we can aim to do things better. We can aim to do things differently. And we can aim to do different things. We can actually remix an entire process and move in a different direction once we know what it looks like and once we know what are the moving pieces, what can we actually influence, what do we have to work with here. And the way that manifests itself is we're looking at 3 different states with a value stream. We're looking at current state, which means that we're looking at what's happening right now. And the way we get that is maybe considering the last few times that we did the process, we went through the process. But often through that, we're discovering an opportunity to improve things right away. Then we look at an ideal state. So we imagine what is the best case scenario for this? What could it look like? And that can inspire us. It can give us the opportunity to be creative and innovative and reimagine what we're doing. And then we come back to earth and we do a future state. So we look at what will this look like in the next 3 to 6 months? What can we actually do given all the things that we have at our disposal? And we can update these things. We can keep these alive. A lot of the times we're keeping these maps living for months and we come back to them and we update them and tweak them and remix them and reimagine them. And it becomes this living document of the flow of value through the organization. So this brings us to dependency mapping. And why is dependency mapping valuable is because so far we've only looked at the team in question. We've looked at the value stream directly. What we want to consider also is what is affecting the value stream from outside. What are the things that the value stream depends on that we may have influence over or we may not, but we want to know, right? So in cases where we have something like a legal approval, this highlight you see on the left-hand side, what happens when we have to go to the legal team 100% of the time, and 99% of the time they just check a box and say, yeah, fine, go ahead. But it takes them anywhere between 20 minutes to do that and 2 weeks to do that. That's where that question mark is. If we don't know how long that's going to take, it's very difficult for us to forecast. It's very difficult for us to improve. And it might not be worthwhile for us to spend a lot of time in improving our part of the value stream, because if we're agonizing over a few hours in the value stream and all of a sudden the legal department could take 2 weeks, then there's a big difference there, right? There's a big opportunity to maybe bring some information to legal and say, if we could tighten this up a little bit, here's what the effect is going to be on the value stream. It's going to be that much more consistent. We're going to go from 3 weeks down to potentially a week. And that can be really big. So the opportunity to have those conversations is driven by the dependency map. And it also drives this understanding of what's happening outside the team. So we separate this into upstream and downstream just to highlight where things happen early in the process, which is often things like plannings, approvals, and then downstream things like environment management, maybe feature enablement, marketing, support, and success. So there can be things where we ship code to production. It sits for 2 weeks because marketing isn't ready, right? Marketing isn't ready to tell customers about the feature, so it stays turned off. So we want to be aware of these things so that we can address them, right? We want them visual. We want them easy to talk about. We want them easy to share. And that's what a dependency map gives us. So we're looking at outside the team with the dependency map. And this allows us to map all kinds of things. There's really not a lot of structure with this. You can map anything that is influencing the team. And this can be meetings. This can be town halls. There can be all kinds of things that show up in a dependency map, especially if they're disruptive to the team or they cause a significant delay. We want them to be visible. We want to see them. We want to measure them if we can, but we want to be aware. And so there can be any number of things that you represent there. It's really a collaborative exercise with the team to highlight all the things that we can think of. We get it all out there, we see, and we can make really good decisions based on that data. That brings us to capability mapping. So capability mapping is sort of the opposite of dependency mapping, but we are talking in a sense about dependencies. We're looking at inside the team. What do we need inside the team to deliver the most critical capabilities inside the value stream? And you can see here, there's only 4 capabilities. I typically look for 8 to 10 that the team will surface as critical to the value stream. And that's for each team, this is different. We have dozens and dozens of capabilities that are needed to do what we do. But there are a few that will target the hotspots, the pains, the gaps, the opportunities in the value stream. And those are the ones we want to look at because they're the highest priority under the circumstances. So we want to look at what are the capabilities that will allow us to reach our goal, which we mentioned was release every 2 weeks. So if we're releasing every 2 weeks, this is why we have test automation. Test automation is absolutely critical. We have infrastructure automation. So we're looking at capabilities that are critical to delivering that goal, that desired outcome. And prime and backup here are roles. We want to be clear on who is driving that forward. Who is the person that we go to when we have challenges or when we want something to get done? We want to identify that because oftentimes those people don't have support. You see these backups that are empty. If we don't have support for someone, it means that they can't go on vacation, or when they do, things fall apart. There's all kinds of reasons why that's detrimental. So we want to be aware of that. Then we look at the skill level as a team. So overall, where do we think we are with that? Are we green? Is everything really good? Or is it something that we need to focus on? And again, this is not a judgment on a single person's capabilities. What we want is the team capability to be extremely high. It doesn't mean that everyone has to know about test automation, but the people that do the people that are contributing to that, we want their skill level to be high. So we want to highlight where it's not so that we can invest in it. We want to focus on how do we get to better? How do we not get to 100%, but how do we get from where we are to better? Resources is where we're looking at what kind of supports do these people have? If I'm going to be working in test automation, am I using APIs? Am I using well-documented resources? Am I using a service where I just have to interact with something? Maybe I have someone else doing the work and I'm just responsible as a liaison to that department. But we want to be clear about that too. And then if we were going to train new people to do this, so let's say test automation, we don't have a backup, we want a backup. How long is it going to take to train that person? How long will it take to bring that person up to speed? And that all informs the score where we can then look at those key capabilities and find out where the gaps are. So this allows us to assess our internal impacts. Just like dependencies are external impacts, we're looking at internal impacts with capabilities. We want to make sure that we have ownership and support for the key capabilities that are involved in our goal. We want to make sure that we have supporting documentation, services, APIs, things that make that capability easier to deliver. And we want to consider, what does it take to bring somebody up to speed on this? Because maybe we want to scale the capability. Maybe we want somebody to be able to move in a different direction and hand off that capability as a prime or a backup to somebody else. So that is the 4 key maps. We went from outcome to flow with the value stream. Then we're looking at dependencies, so outside the team, then capabilities inside the team. And this is giving us this view of everything that it's going to take to level up, right? To improve our odds of delivering on our outcome, to getting to that future state that we want. But we're not done. So what we do after that is we now have a bunch of ideas. We now have a bunch of opportunities that will bring us to a better state, right? So we have investigations that we need to run around the obstacles that we identified in the outcome map. We have, maybe we want to come up with some metrics that will guide our direction. Maybe we pick from the 4 key metrics, maybe not. Maybe we come up with something else. But then moving into the value stream, we have those hotspots. So we have areas where maybe we have to implement some automation, or maybe we have to get rid of a handoff. And then we look at dependencies. So maybe there's an SLA that we need to meet with a team about and negotiate a different SLA, or maybe we need a new capability inside the team that's going to remove an external dependency because it'll allow us to do it inside the team. So all these things create this big backlog of things, right? And we have a rough idea of which ones we should start with, but that's why we do prioritization. So we'll take that big list, we'll map it on a matrix of impact versus effort, but you can use really any prioritization technique here. But that's going to give us an idea of where should we start. What are the things that we should absolutely focus on first? And we bring that to the flow roadmap. So the flow roadmap is really taking that prioritized list of investigations, activities, initiatives, and mapping it to a timeline. So we're looking 3 months out, 6 months out, 12 months out. We're looking at a roadmap that's going to be how we deliver on our outcome. And we can use this as the how for our product roadmap and our technical roadmap as well. Because a product roadmap is just telling you what you need to do, and your technical roadmap is just telling you what you need to do. Nobody's telling you how. The flow roadmap tells you how. So it's a missing piece in between these two roadmaps that really makes it possible to hit the goals that you want. And again, when we're talking about metrics, when we're talking about measurements, back to the 4 key metrics, it's important to balance your metrics, right? So if we're looking at 2-week releases, we want to make sure that our increase in velocity doesn't result in a decrease in quality, right? We don't want issues to start skyrocketing because we're trying to fire everything through the system. So it's important to be considering balance as you're picking these measurements. But a knowledge of the outcome, a knowledge of the value stream, a knowledge of dependencies and capabilities puts you in a much better position to define these metrics that will work best for you. So what do we get out of this so far? So we're starting with the end in mind. We're starting with clarity. We're starting with alignment. We have gone from a goal to actionable steps that will help us deliver on that goal and reach that goal. We're able to see the big picture with the value stream and the maps. We can zoom out, we can zoom in, we can see things from many different angles. And that's going to boost that clarity, that confidence, our ability as a team to say, yes, we can do this. We know exactly how to do this. And we can use the data that we collected to measure our baseline, so measure where we're at, but also periodically measure how much better are we getting? What could we be doing better? What's the new opportunity now that we tackled releasing every 2 weeks? What's next, right? So we can use this practice over and over again to constantly navigate in the right direction and stay on track. And it's important that we bring everybody along. So this is all visual. It's all very easy to share. It's all very easy to understand. So whether you're in marketing or in sales or an executive, or you just started with the company yesterday, you can look at these maps and understand exactly where the insight lies, where the valuable information is. So the way I see this process, the practice of flow engineering, we're answering questions, right? So if we look at a goal like release every 2 weeks, we want to consider what's going to make that happen. What are we doing now that is keeping us from that that goal? What's holding us back? Why aren't we there yet, right? So we want to consider these things from different angles. We want to consider what we could be doing, what's affecting us from outside, what's affecting us from inside. What should we do about that? And then where should our starting point be? And that all forms the plan that makes this all real and makes this all actionable and takes you from not knowing what to do yesterday to knowing exactly what to do today. And so to actually pull this off, what you're going to want is a facilitator. So you're going to want someone who can run these sessions, right? Get everybody excited, engaged, build out the maps, curate the sessions, run the workshops. You're going to want a collaborative whiteboard like Mural. I'm showing you Mural right now. This is how I build maps. A lot of people use Miro, but you can use all kinds of things for this. You're going to want a few sessions. So I max them out at 2 hours because people start to lose energy. And so you break this up over a couple of days. You do 2 hours for each piece and you map these out over time. And you're building this picture over time. You want representatives from across the value stream. So you're going to want leadership who can make decisions about doing things differently, maybe negotiating with other teams or dependencies. And you want individual contributors, people doing the work, because you want their perspective. What's difficult about what they're doing right now? What are the things that we're missing that they see on a daily basis and they wish we could actually address? And that representation from all the different roles and all the different departments, if we're crossing departments in the value stream, we want all those perspectives because we don't get them together enough and we're missing things because of it. And as I mentioned, the leadership buy-in is critical because we need to do things. We need to actually make changes. Once we've identified these opportunities for improvement, we need to actually deliver on them. So leadership buy-in is absolutely critical because they make things happen, right? They can sign for things, they can get funding, they can help move things around or change things, they can help align resources. There's all kinds of important capabilities and access that leadership will bring. And we don't want to be working against leadership. We need them on our side. So we want leadership involved in this from the very beginning. And I think starting from an outcome map is a great way. If you don't have leadership buy-in, you could build that outcome map, present it to leadership and say, here's what we are dealing with. Here's what we want to do. And, here are the obstacles. And maybe the investigations that you propose are doing the maps so that you can figure out what would it take for us to get to better. And then you can go from there. But this gives you a recipe, a playbook that's going to take you from zero to actually getting things done. And what do you get out of this? So what are the outcomes? You could save $20 million, like one of my past clients or 18 months of time in the wrong direction. You could be saving 1 day a week of wasted time and delays and friction. You can boost morale, you can boost performance, you can boost whatever you want. It really depends on your desired outcome, which is a great thing about this approach. Pick any goal, pick it apart, look at it from different angles, look at how it is present in the value stream currently, and define a future state. So for more on this, that is it for me. If you want more information, here's a bunch of links. You can get to all of these through visible.is. But if you want to screenshot anything, take a shot of this and hit any of those links for more information. Thank you very much for your time. It's my pleasure.